I have a lot of favorite tools. It's like, being a proud father and you can't decide what your favorite child is. I have a lot of favorite tools, but the PGA strokes gain tool might be my favorite just because I really believe in the power of the strokes gain stats and how critically important it is. And then finding some ways to translate that into DFS and trying to find value. So the top part of this, each week I will load in the player salaries. So I have each player's salary in here. And then I also have all their up-to-date strokes gained numbers. So what you can do is sort by any of the strokes gained stats and see where each player ranks. So right now I have this sorted by strokes gained total. So for the most part, we are going to see the best players rise to the top here. So I see Dustin Johnson up here in the upper right. I can hover over him and see, okay, he's averaging 2.4 strokes gained per round over 34 rounds, and he costs $11,300. I can see Rory McIlroy actually has a slightly better average, and he costs $800 less than Dustin Johnson. I can see Patrick Cantlay also in the ballpark, and he costs $1,300 cheaper than Dustin Johnson. So what I like about this is it's a really good visual of each salary tier. So I can look and see, okay, the top guys, they're the most expensive, but there might be some value guys that are also in the same ballpark if we're talking about strokes gained total. Or if I'm looking for value, I can see which players kind of lead their tier. So for example, you want guys on the right-hand side of this. So Webb Simpson, amongst all the guys down here in kind of the $7,000 to $8,000 range, he is the best in strokes gained total. He might be someone that I might want to target this week. But you can do any of the stats. So if I say, or if you think this week, hey, approach is going to be very important, I'll click this and you'll see how the visual will update itself. So, okay, now it's a little bit of a different story. Now there's a lot of value in this field because the guys who are actually best in the field on approaches are no more than $8,000. Sergio is up there. Henrik Stenson leads the way. Keegan Bradley. So this is a really good visual. Justin Thomas, Hideki Matsuyama. These are all guys who are in the top of strokes gained approach, but you can see they're cheaper than a lot of their peers. This becomes very critical. If I want to look at putting, you'll see there's even more value because this, putting's pretty volatile. You don't have to hit it a mile off the tee to be a good putter. So a lot of these guys down here at the bottom of the grid bring themselves back into play if you want to get there via putting or you think putting is going to be critically important this week. Scrolling down, this is new and something that I have been tweaking and loving recently. And it's called Who's Hot and Who's Not. And really what I wanted to do is clearly every player has a baseline of how good they are in each one of these strokes gained categories. But golf's volatile. Your average could be, 2 strokes gained per round, but you have one round where you gain 6, another where you lose 4. Like it's just all over the place. So what I wanted to do is kind of find players who are trending in a certain direction. So let me give you an example. What this is doing is it's showing each player their salary this week and their last 30 days of whatever stat that we have chosen. So 4 weeks usually of data. And we're comparing it to their 2019 season baseline. So 2019 season, which started at the end of 2018, that is what our baseline is. So for example, the way this reads is Patrick Cantlay's baseline is 2.28 strokes gained per round. In the last 30 days, he's actually at 3.97, which is a difference of 1.68. And then how many rounds of his sample size is for the 2019 season. So that's the way to look at this. So you're like, wow, Patrick Cantlay really outperforming his 2019 baseline right now. He's very hot. Adam Scott, very hot. Shane Lowry, Matt Wallace, very hot in the last 30 days. Now, what you can also do is hover over any of these players and you're able to actually see their most recent rounds. So you might look at Patrick Cantlay and say, wow, he gained 8 at the the fourth round at the Memorial, no way he's going to do that again. That inflates his numbers. Like, I'm out. Like, I'm going to go play someone else. Or you could say, wow, he has not lost strokes in any round on this list here, which, is what, 10 or rounds or so. He has not lost strokes in any of them. He's a very, very safe golfer. This is someone I might want to roster. And you'll see there's a lot of volatility in some of these. Here's Brooks Koepka. The final round at the PGA, the first round at the RBC Canadian, lost strokes and gained 10 in round one at the PGA Championship. Just like absolutely a huge range of outcomes. And you can do this for any of these stats, right? So if I want approach, now I'm going to get the players who have the best strokes gained approach numbers. I can also sort by biggest difference, right? So for example, Shane Lowry usually loses strokes on approach. In the last 30 days, he's gaining 1.23. So that's a big difference. Even though his, actual number of strokes in the last 30 days might not be as high as other guys, he's playing very far ahead of his actual baseline. And I like to use it for that. And then what I also like to do is I like to use it for putting and find guys that are actually putting really, really poorly right now and see if we can get them to, if we can be a part of their regression back to their mean. So let me give you a couple examples of this. Because putting is so volatile, right? Let's look at Justin Thomas, since a lot of people know who he is, right? Justin Thomas is, for all intents and purposes, a very neutral putter. He is negative 0.06 this season. That's as close to even or average as you're going to see. Sergio's pretty close to 0.03. I mean, those guys are just very, very neutral. Well, both of them, and Justin Thomas specifically, losing almost a stroke and a half per round in the last 30 days. So if I hover over him and say, what the heck is going on? I can see a brutal first round at the RBC Canadian, really bad rounds at the Memorial, and one really bad round on the third round of the Players' Championship. So I like to look at this and say, okay, well, he lost a lot, and Bubba Watson's actually a really good example of this too. His numbers are so skewed because of those 2 rounds at the PGA Championship where he lost over 3 strokes putting in each of them, but gained strokes every other round for the most part in the last 7 or so. Or he was pretty close to neutral. So that to me says this golfer, something happened. He had 1 really bad round or 2 really bad rounds. But if you look at the entirety of his season, he's much better than this. So I might say, okay, he's playing well everywhere else. I'm going to roster him in hopes that the putting comes back. Those are the types of players that I look for. And then finally, if you want a deeper dive into each one of these players, you can search by any player that you'd like here. And like I could type in Rory or anybody that I want, and I can pull up their strokes gained by any category that I'd like. Approach, around the green, off the tee, putting, tee to green, total. And you'll see how many strokes they gained or lost in each of those rounds, and then what their actual scores were. So it should be no surprise that when strokes gained are up, scores are down, but always interesting to kind of see what they made out of that round. So I can click here and say, here's Brooks on approaches. Here's Brooks in putting, much more volatile. A really good way to just to hone in on a specific player for a specific set of rounds.